Good afternoon, guys. Just getting everybody a chance to join. It's good to see some of my returning friends. It's always good to see Vic Catalano. How you doing, Vic? I just want to remind everybody, Q&A is open, chat is open. It's going to be a very interesting conversation today. We're both feeling a little bit under the weather, so there'll be some throat clearing and some hemming and some hawing, and we hope that's not it's not too much of a challenge for you guys. But on behalf of ISM New Jersey Board of Directors, I want to welcome you to this month's episode of Supply Chain Information Flow. Today is going to be an interesting one. We've got we're going to have two IT guys talking about stakeholder engagement. We have Mr. Brad Veech as our guest today. He's multiple Fortune 100 IT sourcing director. Feel free to ask any questions you have in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. Brad is also an author of one of my favorite recent books on procurement, which you cannot see because I'm blurring my background. It's called Software, the Silent Killer of Your Company's Budget by Brad Veech. You can find it on Amazon.
Yep.
Where else, Brad?
That's it. Unless you're buying bulk, then you can go directly to me.
You should buy in bulk, and we'll get all of Brad's information out to you guys in the chat shortly. Buy them for everyone on your team. If you have the pleasure of being responsible for the software category, it's definitely a worthwhile read. But for today, we are talking about stakeholder engagement. I don't know how many of you guys have seen the movie Hamilton or the show, but in the show, there's a really big number done by Aaron Burr. He sings about being excluded from a very important meeting with, Alexander Hamilton and James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, and the number is called The Room Where It Happens. And it's all about being left out and not being there at the time a decision is made. And I know a lot of you guys who live in procurement. I've lived in the procurement world for 20 plus years. Sometimes I feel like that. I feel like I'm not in the room where it happened. And Brad here was nice enough in our conversations to offer up a conversation around how to get into that room where it all happens earlier. So I'm going to start by saying, Brad, you've been everywhere. You've been in a bunch of Fortune 100 companies. Why don't you give us a little history of you in IT sourcing?
Sure, glad to. Like most people, I wound up in this role by accident many years ago. As I frequently say, nobody ever grows up wanting to be a technology procurement person, right? No, that's just not a thing. I actually was an IT guy learning how to build out local area networks, wide area networks, and then that meant I had to negotiate with those contracts and start learning about that. And I became passionate about it. I love the negotiation side of it more than the IT side of it. And so I just took hold of those reins and started learning as much as I could about the procurement piece of it, and have loved every minute since. There's never two deals that are the same. There's never 2 days that are the same in this profession, which is fabulous. But yeah, I've had the opportunity to work primarily in the big corporations in Minneapolis area, right? The Deluxe Corporation, Medtronic, ATK, and Best Buy were all up in the Minneapolis area, and really gave me my anchor to start and learn a lot about this category.
So as a category lead, as an IT guy who lived in the procurement world, did you find yourself separated in some ways from the IT decision makers because you were procurement, or?
Sure. Sure, absolutely. I mean, keep in mind, in my opinion, indirect spend is a pretty immature organization in any company, right? Direct spend had the majority of the focus for years and years and years, and indirect spend was considered non-strategic even into the 1970s, 1980s. And so then we started, realizing that was a significant spend that we need to pay attention to, and technology as a category in procurement is even, more immature, newer. And it's using some of the knowledge and some of the things that we've learned from all the other categories, because I've led direct spend and all the indirect spends categories. And it's using those to make sure, some of that baseline knowledge to make sure that we keep our processes for the technology piece going and consistent and maturing. Now, when you add the complexity of technology on top of the traditional indirect spend, that's where it really gets fun.
This is true. This is true. And I think from my career perspective, it's been mostly the same, except I've never stepped outside of technology spend. I've always been a tech guy, what I enjoy. And it's interesting to have it's a detriment to me in some ways, because I don't have that other experience outside of technology, but it's also brings me great joy because I get to play with the toys instead of just like seeing them on a piece of paper, right? Because now I'm friends with the server guys who are letting me, giving me a service account so I can look in the Azure console instead of just, looking around and seeing it on a contract and understanding that. Yeah. So, but that's living in smaller pockets, right? Where you can get localized attention from your IT team. In your history, you've been a leader in a lot of large companies, right? You mentioned Best Buy, you mentioned Medtronics. How is engagement with stakeholders different in those organizations?
Yeah, and I've had the ability to run the gamut too of where we report into as a technology procurement group, right? I've seen it in finance, report up through finance. I've seen it report into IT, both. When it reports into IT, I've seen more traction in getting involved earlier in the deals, which really shouldn't be, except for the fact that you have a cleaner line of communication to the executives, right? It's going to sound horrible, but it's the biggest problem in corporate America, period. I get asked all the time, how do you get engaged sooner? How do you get engaged earlier? How do we do this so that, we're not being brought in at the last minute and the contract and proposal and everything's just thrown over the fence at us and they say, here, can you execute this? Well, that's not our job. Our job is to actually negotiate and be a partner. But it's communication. I mean, as cliche as that sounds, it's communication. And then you have to have some wins, right? And then you over communicate. If you get a leader involved that is buying into your program and your value, over communicate. It's just frustrating at times when through the years, some of the biggest complaints I got from team members' performances were, hey, we don't know where this program or project's at. We don't know what's going on. We feel like we're in the dark, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, procurement gets a bad enough rap the way it is, and we get blamed for enough stuff, period, right? We don't need to create more problems for ourselves. But it's almost always communication, right? I'll go to that person and say, hey, where's this at? I need to get an update. Oh, we're almost done with it. Well, why didn't you tell the stakeholder that you're almost done with it, right? It's those kind of things, but it's really over communicating when you've got their attention and a big win headed their way.
So you've got your procurement team and you're communicating to the stakeholders well. but you still got these pockets, hypothetically, you still got these pockets where you could be making big wins, but you're not able to because you're still getting the cold shoulder. Do you have, in your past, have you had any experience where you've had to kind of either weasel your way into these conversations or just like kick in the door? Do you have some examples of that type of stuff?
Yeah, both. I don't think it's hypothetical. I think everybody has rogue spend, right? There's cowboys out there everywhere. Everybody thinks they can negotiate, period, right? They just don't understand the overall complexity and what's behind the scenes or what other value could be added. But as far as kicking down the door, rogue spend on corporate credit cards is one of the most fun things I did. I had the ability, because we did report into finance at this particular time, so I had the ability to go in and shut down all the credit cards for any technology buys. So their cards would start getting declined if they tried to buy anything that the credit card association deemed as a technology solution of any kind. So that kind of forced the hand of who was, creating problems or buying things outside of a process. As far as what did you call weaseling my way in? I'm always trying to do that. I show everybody or tell everybody, we can, the salespeople are trained. Point blank, salespeople are trained to avoid procurement. I don't care what book you read or what training program you go to. They're trained to avoid procurement. They're trained to deal with the people who has the budget and can make the decisions. Right? We're just spending other people's money. We don't have the budget for these things. Right. And so they're trained to do the right thing from their perspective. But it's figuring out a way to stop that as much as possible. Anytime I get engaged with any of the leaders, I always send them an email with, never tell a supplier. It's a list of 10 things that you never tell a supplier. Yeah. They don't realize that salespeople don't ask questions by accident. They're trained 4 to 6 weeks a year, mandated to take 4 to 6 weeks of training a year on how to infiltrate, avoid procurement, and sell product. So whenever I talk to those leaders or have a chance to get in front of them, my weaseling the way in is, look, yes, I will go ahead and execute this agreement for you, even though you've already got the quote, you've already done the negotiation, you think it's a good deal. I will still be able to provide value. What does real success look like, right? Now, I'm only going to provide this much value, where if you would have brought me in the beginning, I could have provided this much value. And that's what they have to understand, that yes, I get it, they have a project, they have deadlines to meet, they have things that they have to provide for the business for it to be a success. As far as the project goes, but there's a long-term value that most people miss in the business. They're only looking at the shiny object right in front of them.
Yeah, it's very true. That's very true. And you feel that is the same in centralized procurement versus decentralized environments? Because I go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, looking at your history, you've got like an organization like Medtronic, where it's, theoretically working as one organization. Then you have something like Best Buy, where you've got stores all over the country. Do you feel like the approach is the same in a decentralized environment, or maybe even a siloed environment?
Yeah, ironically, the example you used with Best Buy and Medtronic are you would think they are what you said, but they're completely the opposite. Medtronic is very siloed by all their different business units. And when I was there, one of the big projects we had was to centralize the technology procurement. Where Best Buy, even with all the stores, the technology procurement was very centralized through the main corporate headquarters, which doesn't make sense when you look at the outside of the business, right? But I think centralized works way better. I mean, anytime you can utilize your master agreements and maintain control of the suppliers and those agreements, any addendums, amendments, or anything like that needs to be added to it, you gain leverage every time something like that occurs.
Leah made a comment that she's experienced people thinking they are born negotiators and don't appreciate or understand the strategy, formality behind it.
Yep.
Negotiation is a dance. I love that. I love that
Yeah,
statement.
that's good. I like that. Yeah. No, yeah. And that's everywhere. I mean, I've been told when I was running the hardware stuff, right? I can go on, you know, pick a platform and buy it cheaper online than I can buy it through you guys. Well, you can, but, and like, you know, Lee said, probably realizes is you can, but that then, you know, maybe minimizes our rebate, maybe doesn't help us meet the minimum commitments. I mean, there's so many other things that go with it. It could be bundled with something else at that particular time to where we may be able to get it cheaper, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? It's just working through all those details, and that's tough because everybody thinks they can negotiate and everybody thinks they can, you know, be a buyer of something.
This is true. This is true. Yeah, I've had many of those experiences in my career, where you come in at the last second and they're like, here, I negotiated this for you.
Yeah.
And you have to tell them you missed A, B, C, D, and E. This is an area of risk. And, you know, now let's go get legal involved, right?
And it's not even the normal stakeholders that, you know, the senior managers or directors that have the budgets and stuff. It can even be the lead executives. I mean, I had literally a C-level executive get up and tell one of the top 5 software suppliers in the globe, one of the big boys, at their national conference that he will be the first person and we will be the first company to launch this new solution that they have.
Ooh.
We weren't done negotiating. We were probably realistically only about halfway through the negotiations. So he thought because of what he had talked to them about, we were done. He thought he had a good deal. But he only saw that shiny object. He didn't take into consideration everything else that's associated with it. And in that particular situation, there was a connector that was going to drive up license cost on 2 other solutions that we have without him even understanding that.
Yeah. Wow. So how do you, that must have really screwed up your negotiation leverage.
Horrible. Horrible. But then again, you know, we're professionals. We're good at what we do. We're all here to get the best long-term deal possible for the company. So then you start going through the, you know, what type of services can we get? Can we get free tickets to this or that or the other? There's all sorts of other little value add things that you can add once somebody messes up the pricing, the overall pricing for you.
So you mentioned one of the top 5 software organizations. And I imagine with your history, you've dealt with a lot of the biggies. How do you react to the very recent mindset shift around negotiating software license costs, whereas some of the larger organizations that you deal with, they usually start with the letter S. You can pick which one. They have this no first mindset. No matter what you ask for, they're going to say no, or maybe, all right, let me think about it. How do you, as a IT procurement professional, what tack do you take for dealing with those guys?
Well, they're actually trained to say no. That is actually a part of their training. So I ask salespeople questions constantly, completely off-base questions. I mean, I will ask them how much they make. I'll ask them how close they are to their quarterly bonus, what trip they're going to get if they get this deal closed, all kinds of stuff. And sometimes they answer and sometimes they don't, but they'll never answer if you don't ask, right? They are trained to say no. There's no doubt about it. I've had multiple salespeople tell me that. Now, that tells me if we're dealing with the salesperson and only the salesperson all the way through the deal and we get a signature, you're probably not getting the best deal because they don't have any authority. They have their limitations. If they can sell everything in this window of opportunity, they can sell all they want and the business is doing amazingly well. You want to push, right? You want to push. Now, if you don't know what success looks like from your internal customer, you don't know what to push for. And probably the second biggest mistake, other than communication, that I see people make is they don't meet with that customer and true stakeholder and truly understand what success looks like. I mean, at the very beginning, you have to know, because number one, they're going to get oversold. If they don't need it, they're going to bundle stuff together and get oversold. But then you can't create a contract that truly represents what long-term success looks like for the company unless you know what they actually need.
So as we go through this process, right, we are now engaging our key stakeholders, and we're trying to define success, right? What does success look like? Oh, you bought it and it came in under budget, and we avoided any risk, and there's no possible way for us to get on the front page of the newspaper by installing this piece of software. How does that translate into long-term procurement success? Because that's a very vague answer, right? Is there a filter or a lens that you put on it to say, yeah, great, we have this budget, but that's not success to me?
No, I mean, going back to the overall project, I mean, there's so much complexity to an IT procurement, in any project that involves new technology. Everything talks to everything else. Everything's complicated. Everything is a risk. I mean, a lot of people didn't understand risk in procurement and sourcing until technologies just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now go find a project that doesn't have technology embedded in it, right? Everything has got software, it seems, embedded in it. But the overall success has to come from multiple areas, right? You have to understand what it looks like, from my opinion. They have to understand what it looks like from your stakeholders, but you're dealing with all your other partners too, right? I mean, procurement's just this hub in the middle, right? We have to understand the stakeholders. We have to understand the technology. We have to understand negotiations, but we also need to understand what success looks like from the legal and our legal partners, and our finance partners, and our risk assessment people. So the complexity of what success looks like isn't as simple as I made it sound to begin with. Sorry.
No need to apologize. No need to apologize. I just, I thoroughly enjoy having conversations with great minds. So trying to dig a little deeper into that is part of that. Like I said in the beginning, you wrote a book that, from reading the book, it's clear, and from listening to you talk, it's clear that you love the procurement function, right? And everything that you do, and full disclosure, I've seen Brad speak in person at ProcureCon in Boston, and I was fascinated. He was a very dynamic speaker, and from that moment, I knew I had to have him talk on the show. I had to have him come and just get some time to pick his brain, right? And at this moment, you are seeing me rein myself in because I have a million questions that I want to ask personally about the things that he's done and about his book, but I'm trying to keep it professional, right? Again, back to your love of procurement led you to write this book, right? You've been in indirect procurement. You recognize that there's a gap between the knowledge that our salespeople are given, the people that we're, for lack of a better word, facing off against. They have this huge training, you said 4 to 6 weeks. How do we, as leaders and as procurement people, how do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly why I wrote the book. I mean, I avoided conferences and talking at conferences for years and years and years. And I thought I could change this industry just, one company at a time, and that's not going to happen. We're all in this fight together, and we need to join forces and fight against this together. Um, I realize that there's a lot of companies that don't even have technology specific sourcing groups, right? And
Yeah.
totally understand that it's a big budget drain, things like that. That's why I wrote the book. I want to help as many people as possible get the best deal that they can get possible. Um, no such thing as an unselfish act, too. I want some of these executives to read this book and realize the mistakes they're making. But the 4 to 6 weeks training that I mentioned that they get, and we have to beg, fight, and wrestle people to get anything training wise,
Yeah.
which just seems so unfair to me. It's worse than the 4 to 6 weeks training. Think about the fact that they have an isolated portfolio of solutions. They have 3, 5, 10 things that they sell. That's it. They have 1, 2, or 3 customers. That's it. Their knowledge is so much deeper and greater in their area of expertise that you're negotiating with them against. Chances are you have 15 to 20 open negotiations with 15 to 20 different contracts, different T's and C's, all getting redlined up differently, and different licensing metrics, different everything. You're seeing hundreds of in every year that you're doing this job, and they've got 3 to 10. I mean, there's no way it's going to be a fair playing field. It's just not. The question is, what can we do to close that gap to make it better?
So what can we do?
Share the word as much as possible, talk to each other, build these communities like this, share information that you can share. Be careful of what you share and what you don't share, but it's going to the conferences and meeting people like yourself that's passionate about this, and then talking to them. Joseph Martinez, I see his name on the list. It's great minds like that help us build this community of people that can help each other. If you've got an idea, share it with somebody, talk to somebody. If you've got a challenge and a contract, talk to somebody. I mean, I can't tell you. You saw my presentation. The one thing that bugs me more than anything is how they put in, CPIs and increase year over year in contracts. And I'm a firm believer that a contract should never go up once you sign it in a software deal anyway.
Yeah.
And it should really decrease, because the fact that their cost of doing business is going down every year on your licenses and your volume, and you're getting better understanding the solution. You're making less calls in. Their ability to buy storage goes down every year. I mean, it's just silly that we pay more and more every year. I get lots of emails and calls about that, because that's one thing that I'm really passionate about. But it's sharing that kind of data. I mean, lots of people go, that can't happen. Our price can't go down every year. And then when you lay out what can happen and how it can happen, why it should happen, people buy, they're like, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense.
That was one of my key takeaways. It's something that I had known for a while, and I'd had these discussions, and I had pulled away from it because there were so many failures in that challenge, right? You go in and you say, this is what should happen, and you get that no. And then you get someone who overrides you, who needs the product, and you're just like, all right, I'm gonna stop fighting, right?
Yep.
But again, we'll go back to you and your love for the art of indirect and technology procurement, right? Your book lays out not just the challenge of us versus the sales rep in training. It lays out so many different ways that as procurement people, we have to look and we have to function, right? You talked about security risk assessment, right? That's not something that your sales guy has to worry about. We have to worry about GDPR and third-party risk management and again, you talked about the licensing metrics. Do you have a checklist of things that we as IT procurement folks should be studying up, right? A lot of us think about negotiation books and stuff like that, but what are some other things in your experience that we need to learn to be good at this job?
Yeah, no, I think checklists are an amazing tool to use in procurement. I think there's a lack of them because, again, we have so many things going on at any one time. It's easy to forget. It's easy to just be that person that says, I've done this 1,000 times. I know what I'm doing, and just start doing things, right? It's like, I always talk about there's no such thing as the perfect contract. And I can prove that because I've written the perfect contract, and then a year later I go back and look at it at the renewal and go, what was I thinking? I mean, it's just crazy. Checklists are amazing. I mean, and there should be a standard, I'm not going to call it a checklist, but there should be a standard set of questions that you send to your stakeholder when you get an intake or hear about a project. And you know what? You should send those questions even if they've already told you they negotiated it and here's the deal, I just need it executed. You should still send those questions because that's a great way to give them a little bit of an aha moment of, I never thought of that. I should have brought procurement in sooner. Send them the list of things to never tell a supplier when you send that to them. Again, it's going to give them a little bit of an aha moment of, oh, I did tell them my budget, or, oh, I did tell them what day I need this absolutely installed by. All things they'll use against you, I promise. There's a checklist that I've used for years for the legal intake. I feel so sorry for some of my legal counterparts through the years when, we are the ones that have all the information, and then we just flop a piece of paper over to them and expect them to know exactly what the business needs and, what success looks like. Well, they can't do their job with that. So meet with your legal people, understand what they're looking for from you in a checklist format when you send that contract over. Finance, same thing. But then the real, where I really harp on a checklist is at the renewals. 90 days, 120 days before any renewal, you should send the business owner, the budget holder, the finance person, a notification, this is coming up, and a checklist of, are you using it? How many are you using? Are you decreasing it? Is it in your roadmap? All the questions that you would want to ask about a renewal before the renewal notification period.
Yeah.
That's the key. Not 2 weeks before the renewal, before the renewal notification period. And I can't harp on that is the single most important date in a contract for me, especially in the software realm. But it's a great way to get people engaged, and again, start getting you brought in earlier and earlier.
Yeah. And there are ways to automate that. If anyone has perfected the renewal process, I pay good money to know the secret. I actually did a Power Automate class, and one of the things that it gave me was an idea around my contract notification process, right? So, we've got SAP Ariba for contracts, and it does some stuff, but it doesn't quite do as much as I want it to do.
Not unless you got 10 people managing the data every day.
Exactly. So, we do a dump into an Excel sheet, and then I took that Excel sheet, and now I've got a little Power Automate flow that emails the user 6 months beforehand with a list of questions that I want them to answer and they need to think about. And yeah, so far it's worked out pretty well. There's a lot of people who get a lot of emails from me that are not happy, but they answer. And it's a very recent thing. It was very cool. Again, tech geek, I want to play with all the toys.
Right.
So I got myself a license and I started playing around and I found something that worked.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we sit in a unique space, right? In procurement, especially in technology. And every company is a tech company, whether you want to believe it or not. Every company wants to find ways to use their data and monetize that data. They want actionable insights on their customers. They want to think about how their colleagues and customers experience dealing with them, right?
Absolutely.
And there's so much of that that becomes an opportunity for us to educate ourselves, right? One of the things that I'm curious about is, how do you learn things from within your organization? Do you sit with people who are building out new product lines and understand, like, get education, just education sessions? Like, is that something that you do on a regular basis?
It happens once in a while. Going back in my history, the absolute best example that I've seen of that is at Medtronic, where the CIO invited me to his weekly staff meeting, where I was just a part of everything they did as far as building out the roadmaps. What are we looking at here? And 80% of the time I was dead silent. I just sat there just to observe. But once in a while, somebody would bring up a project and be like, we need to, well, one that happened there was a great example, was the cell phones. They wanted to put cell phones in this particular realm. And I said, super. But with cell phones, the functionality that comes with that, you're going to have license costs for all of this functionality that you want them to have. No, we didn't think about that. We were just thinking about the cell phone cost itself and the networking cost. Like that, that's not what you're looking for to have them use it, right? So it was without question the best, because I knew every project on the roadmap, and they actually had a roadmap. Realistically, most of the IT budgets and budget planning and all the things that go on, I'm pretty well convinced at this point they put in their projects that they think they will get approved. They get their budget and their funding. Then it's like, that's my right hand. Don't pay attention to what the left hand's doing, because that's where they're going to go spend all the money. Right? This new shiny thing comes along and they're like, we're just going to take some of the money we already have allocated here to do this project because it's going to show a better payback quicker, or whatever the case may be. Budgets now are really just a placeholder, unless you're talking about the hardware and refreshes and things like that. But in software, it's for sure. Very rarely do I sit through all of the AOP planning and budgeting and all that I actually see that come to fruition anymore. Once in a while, it'll be a giant project. Yeah, it's going to be a 3-year deal, whatever the case may be. There will be a path for that. But most of the mid-tier to smaller projects that get approved really hardly ever get spent on what they were initially budgeted for.
Yeah, I had a similar situation where we had, I don't know, a small IT team and some outsourcing people, and we had 189 projects that they were planning to do in the next year. And I said to my boss, I said, I'm going to take these 20, this total dollar amount, and I'm going to buy a software asset management system somewhere around June, because they're not going to get to those. So let's just put that money to the side for me, because they're not going to use it. Do you mind? Okay, that's great.
There's not enough resources to do that many projects.
Exactly. But you listen to the business and you listen to people, and they're like, yeah, we can get it done for the minimal amount of money. What are you passionate about right now, aside from writing books and traveling the world? What are you passionate about?
I think, like I said, I'm going to do whatever I can to level the playing field. I mean, that's really what my passion is. I don't need to open up the quarterly reports of all these software suppliers and see 85% profit margin. That's obscene. I just need, to figure out how to do that, how we can all join together and do that. The other thing that really, and probably is going to be a big part of my next book, actually, is this category is not developed the way a lot of the other categories are, like we talked about earlier. So I think it's not looked at properly. I truly believe in my heart of hearts that this will be one of the best professions down the road, and it will get the recognition that it needs, and it will be understood by the executives of how much value we actually bring to the organization. You know, and it's not about savings to me. I mean, yes, that's what the street wants to hear. Yes, that's what the CFO wants to hear. But it's about the long-term value to the organization and making sure that we get the recognition, making sure we get the funding to truly make this one of the great categories inside of a company.
Excellent, excellent. I'm looking forward to your next book. Had a little bit of a conversation with you about it on Monday, and I'm excited. I'm excited. Maggie wants to know, is the second book coming out this month?
Oh, no. Maggie, the problem is I'd never written a book until last year. I wrote the book that David referenced. I don't have my thing on, so you can actually see. I like the bomb. I like that was really fun. I wrote it in 12 weekends. This is strictly a Brad brain dump. There's nothing, you know, really scientific, or I would get fired from a college because there's no references. This is just me. I did say that it was coming out by the end of the year, and there's a little bit of a conflict. So I have to wait until spring. It's coming out, but it's probably going to be spring. And I started one path, and I've got about halfway done, and then I'm kind of melding into another path. So over time, there may be 2 books in this giant conglomerate of things that I have written up at this point. But yeah, there's a little conflict that I can't put it out this year. It'll be March, April timeframe. But thanks for checking, Maggie.
She's holding you to it too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Brad. It was great talking to you, man. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Everybody asked if you're going to be speaking again at ProcureCon IT.
I think I am. Yep, I think I am. My wife and I are going to go through the schedules between Christmas and New Year's and try and figure out what our schedule looks like. I do believe I will be there with a couple other ones too.
All right. Would you recommend to IT organizations transitioning from one procurement platform to another one, or to an updated version? That's a question from Rodrigo that just popped in.
Oh,
and that'll be the last one.
Okay, I don't see it. A procurement platform? Are you talking Ariba, Coupa, those type of things?
Yes.
So my firm belief is Coupa, I call it Coupa-Ariba because they're the same to me. And unless you've got a kabillion people to massage the data, they're not going to give you what they want, what you are really looking out of it. I would find smaller niche, expert solutions inside of your area. If you want an RFP tool, go find an RFP tool. Find a way to connect it to the back end accounting systems. Find a procurement process tool that is more specific to what you need. The smaller ones, they're way more nimble, way better. Do yourself a favor. It's just the big ones I think are going to be gone. I really do. I don't think they're going to be able to last. Now the problem is you buy this big bundle of stuff and then you decide you don't like that because it's too cumbersome. So you go buy another one, but you've got this one module in the old one that you're still using. So you're still paying for the whole dang thing as well as the new one. And then a third one comes along. Really just go find the industry leading smaller niche-y things and connect with APIs. It's way better.
Great guidance. Thank you, Brad. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining. Brad, as always, good talking to you. Go out and get his book. Show your book again, because you don't have a filter. Sorry about that.
But yeah, if anybody wants to buy it, you know, 5 or more copies, just get a hold of me. I'm assuming you have my contact information, you'll send it out. Just get a hold of me. I'll sell it to you cheaper, no shipping costs, anything like that.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I'll see you in a month where we'll be talking to Klaus about being a global leader. Interesting discussion about the differences in cultural, the difference in cultures. Have a great day. Thank you so much, Brad. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, David.
Bye-bye.